Everyone, welcome along to a fine Wednesday night discussing all things creature feature, genre, sequelish, writing, career and craft. My name's Shayne Armstrong. I'm the Queensland Chair and National Exec for the Writers Guild. Before we get into tonight's Q&A with my two fabulous guests, just a reminder that if you are a writer, either early career or a professional, do yourself a favor, as a great man once said, and join the Guild. The Guild has lots of great incentives for members, professional development, entry into exclusive competitions and mentorships. But beyond that, the most important thing is in our charter, we are protecting writers' rights. So, whether you're in the beginning of your career or quite well into it, there's always things that can go a little bit pear-shaped with deals. So always make sure you're being looked after financially, credit-wise, and many other ways. So as I said, do yourself a favor, join up with the Guild if you're not a member already. Many great incentives to do so. So yes, on to tonight's event. Thank you for joining us from around the country as well, not just in Queensland. If there's a benefit to come out of the COVID situation, it's that we can reach out and have guests from interstate and then connect people from around the entire country. And I believe from around the world as well. A few people are dropping in from tonight as well. So welcome to everyone, wherever you are on the planet. So tonight we're talking with Sarah Smith and Andrew Traucki, the writer and director respectively of Blackwater Abyss. And before we get into it and introduce everyone, I will play the trailer, which I've prepared earlier. I hope this works.
So there's a cave.
This thing is unexplored.
The shaft goes way down.
Ready?
See at the bottom.
What do you reckon?
Let's check it out. What'd I tell you?
This is incredible, huh?
Hey.
What the hell is that? The cave's filling up. The river must have burst its banks. We're gonna be in the water whether we like it or not.
And no one knows we're down here, right?
Does anyone have service?
It's only a short swim.
Victor!
We gotta swim out of here.
Did you miss something?
You cannot get in that
What
water.
choice do I have? Croc's are territorial. He's not gonna be happy till we're all gone.
Whatever you do, don't splash.
Do not move a muscle.
Well, my two guests, as we see here tonight, first we've got Sarah Smith. Hi, Sarah. We're considered as that you mixed up. Both your name tags are exactly the same on my screen. Sarah is one of Australia's most experienced writers. Your CV is just absolutely incredible. Bike Club, Love Child, Bloom, House of Bond, Killing Field, Winter, Wild Boys, Rescue Special Ops, Wanted, The Alice, All Saints, McLeod's Daughter, Canal Road, Sea Patrol, and Wonderland. And also ask you about a little bit later as well, so I won't get into those just yet. We'll also be talking about your transition into features from TV and why the hell you've gone from writing quite generally nice shows to writing horror films. So that'll be one thing. So thank you for joining us, Sarah. Andrew Traucki is, I called you before this article came out. I called you the creature feature king of Australia. and I'll ask you whether that sits comfortably with you a little bit later. He's one of Australia's premier horror and thriller directors. Blackwater is easily in my top 5 Australian horror films of all time. I've declared this publicly even before this event was several times. I jumped many times watching Blackwater. It was genuinely scary and an excellent thriller. So apart from the Blackwater, he's also directed The Reef, The Jungle, and Blackwater Abyss, of course, and also a segment of the ABCs of Death that was, which I'll ask you about a little bit later as well. It was, without any blood or gore, one of the most dark and disturbing segments I find. You know, I watched the entire thing and I can remember 3 or 4 of them, and that one was just disturbing, just dark. And yeah, anyway, you can't, I think that's your thing. It's daylight horror. You know, you think it's lovely, it's sun and it's surf and it's sky. Oh, and then shit happens. Bad shit happens. I think that's your trademark. You're a surfer yourself, aren't you? Are you a surfer?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Right. Well, we'll talk about that as well. And also co-wrote and co-directed the cult sci-fi classic Rocky Star for SBS, which if you haven't seen it, has anyone done you the service of putting it on YouTube, Andrew?
It's complicated because the rights have expired, and so it's just one of those situations where it's all a bit messy with rights, so no one's really put it up anywhere, which is really sad because it's a great little show.
Well, yeah, it was excellent. A great little homage to the Republic serials and
yeah,
sort of stuff. Fantastic stuff. Anyway, yeah, maybe somewhere one day we'll put it somewhere where we can all watch it again and enjoy it. I used to be the person who'd sit up late at night on SBS. Is that when it was? Yeah, and watch it then. So,
there you go.
Cool. So look, firstly, just a quick question just to sort of like ease us up to this point without going into too much detail. Just if you could just tell us about your early careers, kind of what led you into the film industry, and then eventually your roles as, you know, writer or director or director. I guess, how did you break in and stay there?
You want to go first, Sarah?
Sure. Well, I went back to uni in my late 20s because I dropped out earlier in my career and then had 2 kids, and I was picked up script writing, and I didn't even know if I could write at all. And from that, I wrote a feature film which won a new screenwriters bursary in WA. So actually, when you said I had started into television and went to film, it was the other way around. And I've always been drawn to genre. I wrote various different thrillers across the years, and they're just very hard to get up in this country. And that actually led me to getting my first television writing job, which was on kids television, which in WA was the main staple over there. And then when I moved to Sydney around 2000, I just segued into writing television in 1 hour, and just worked across various different roles, you know, from just freelance writing, editing, script producing, and yeah, one thing led to the other. So I had a career in television, even though I never set out to have a career in television, if that makes sense.
Okay. So, but you've come full circle, I guess.
Yeah, that's right.
And were you working?
Strange enough now.
With the kids' TV, were you working in genre within that? Because quite often there
was a lot of it was I did a show called Ship to Shore, which a lot of people actually know. It's, you know, all kids on an island. It was lots of fun. Another one called Minty. Yeah, just a bunch of them that all live action, you know, not animated, but. Yeah, there's a lot of freedom in kids' television, you know, just because you can do a lot of things that you can't do in adult television.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it was fun.
Thanks. Yeah. Andrew, what about yourself?
Oh, well, I think I was a little bit late to film. I was going to become an engineer, and then that all fell apart when I realised that there were basically a lot of beer guzzling guys standing around talking about their...
Yeah, and who needs a stable career?
Yeah, that's right. Who wants to make money? But anyway, and then I sort of drifted for a while, but one day I went onto the set of because like I say, I wasn't really exposed to film, but I went onto the set of a kids show, Secret Valley, I think it was, and to pick up a girlfriend. And there I saw all these people standing around this camera with these lights, and it was this amazing vista outside, but inside it just looked like magic. I just fell in love with the fact that these people were making this fictitious thing with light and acting. And
what was the show, did you say?
I think it was called Secret Valley.
I love Secret Valley when I was a kid. I love Spider McGlurk and Sparrow, and It had Hugh Keays-Byrne from Mad Max as the bad guy.
There you go. That's right. It did. Yeah. So anyway, that sort of ignited a spark in me, and I just started, making films, little films, and that sort of stuff. When you got a degree at Macquarie in communication, and then I don't know, just cobbled things together, and actually made Rocky Star, and then got onto making stuff for the internet. Then worked at the film commission for a while, and there I think I read enough scripts to go, geez, I think I could do this. So many of them were that bad. Anyway, so I just started writing, and I'm here purely because I'm tenacious, I think, because I the probability of me actually making a film and being a writer is, it shouldn't have probably happened, but I just kept on going, and finally I got a break, and then I got another break, and then I got another break, and so, yeah.
I think, honestly, tenacity and a thick skin are the best qualities you can have beyond some level of talent.
Yeah, I agree.
There are plenty of, adequately talented people that just have, thicker skins and a greater deal of persistence, and other people that are more talented sort of just drop off. People freak when I tell them this, but the job is 90% rejection. Don't you think it is? It's like you have pictures or applications or scripts. It's a no 90% of the time.
Yeah,
so if you can't handle that, it's you've got to. It could be a nice polite no, but it's not.
I think so. I think you've got to really want to do it. Hey.
Yeah. New generations of filmmakers should be fine with that, because they're used to internet dating, so I think they get rejected quite often there as well. So we didn't have that. Fantastic. So earlier this week, as I said before, there's a feature article in the Sydney Morning Herald that was telling readers what I think we already know, that creature features are an evergreen genre, and they do decent box office around the world, and occasionally here as well, and that certainly audiences can't seem to get enough of killer croc and shark films. There seems to be, especially those ones, shark films especially, coming out regularly. What do you think is the appeal of the creature feature, either personally to yourselves or to an audience? Sarah, what do you think?
I think for me, it's will I survive? I think we all have a fundamental thing of what would I do in a situation that's terrifying, and how could I survive? And so you always want somebody to survive. That's what I think in these films. I feel really ripped off when I watch a creature feature or equivalent of when nobody gets away, because then I think, well, I just wasted 2 hours watching that and nobody survived. So you always put yourself, like I guess one of my favorite all-time films is Alien, and that's a creature feature in space, obviously. And I can watch that endlessly, because I'm there going, right. Am I getting that
gone back to get the cat, Sarah? That's
I would not have gone back to get the goddamn cat. But there you go. So yes, I really do think it comes back to that very visceral core thing that's in all of us about what would we do, and how would we survive?
Great, thank you. Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, well, it's the most primal of instincts, isn't it? I mean, we up until this last 500 years, whatever, or maybe 5,000 years, we sort of had to avoid being eaten by things, and so that's deeply ingrained in our genes, and so it's very easy to activate that, especially when you are a coastal country like Australia, and every second month someone's taken by a shark, or at least attacked by one. So that's very anyone who goes in the sea will have that thought in their brain. I think it's a lot less so with crocodiles, because we're not exposed to them so much, but if you live by the sea, or even if you just go in the sea, whenever you go in the sea, you've got the thought of a shark there somewhere, probably.
Well, especially in the last 12 months.
Yeah, well, it's been increasing, hasn't it? Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, and so it's very, very primal, and script writers and everybody wants to tell a story need to tap into some emotion, and tapping into a very primal one is going to be, I think it's going to help you, because everyone can relate to it.
Yeah. Sarah, you mentioned Alien. What are some other creature features that you love?
Oh, I'm a big fan of Andrew's Blackwater. I again love that film, and so yeah, it was a joy to be able to kind of continue the franchise, I have to say. just trying to think, sorry, off the top of my head, which
Well,
ones I...
obviously Jaws.
Yeah, Jaws. Thank you. Thanks for the prompt. Yes, Jaws, which I love. I mean, yeah, I even like things like arachnophobia, which is a little tiny creature, but it can kill, so that's exciting. I don't know.
Australia has not yet made its, full-on Australian spider film yet.
No, it hasn't. I think there's been lots of attempts.
Yeah, well, they made the Guardians of the Tomb a few years ago, which is a Chinese co-pro, but I don't think it wasn't comfortably an Australian kind of film. We haven't made our,
quintessential one.
Our quintessential film. Yeah, and it's interesting you should mention Jaws, Andrew, because whether it was intentional and unintentional, I think I drew parallels with Jaws with especially the third act of Jaws with Blackwater. Three people facing off against something, and I wonder. I don't even wonder. I'm guessing you had a challenge with the budget on that one. It was fairly low budget, and you did something just so amazingly that Jaws attained, where the absence of the croc was just as scary as its presence. The water becomes, and the same for Blackwater Abyss, obviously, but just when the environment itself becomes a stand-in for the creature, even when it's not present.
Yeah,
and that was menacing.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's basically one of my underlying motivations, really. I just think suspense is far more interesting than action. So, well, not necessarily. Obviously, action can be amazing, but when you're working in Australia on genre, probably don't have the budget to do amazing action. But beyond that, it's just more interesting, isn't it? Because I think in life, the most scary things as we're going through COVID, we'll know, is the uncertainty, and not knowing where that presence is far more fearful, I think, than knowing where it is. I always reflect on, Stephen King's. He's got that great book, Dance Macabre, which he talks all about the 70s and 80s horror genre films from America and around the world. And he always says, the creature at the top of the stairs behind the door is much scarier than the creature at the top of the stairs in front of the door. And I just think that's so true. However, you will get always a divide. There are always those people, usually young American males, who just go, oh, where's the action? There's not enough gore. And then you get the other people who go, I love the suspense, and it's fantastic that you didn't just try and fill it with gore.
I think when a lot of people do also say that they hate horror films, what they mean is they hate that feeling of suspense and dread. It's that is almost the cruelest part. You'll find they also hate those really intense thrillers like Seven. It'll be the same sort of visceral revulsion to that being kept in that state.
Yeah.
So, just going back to that article, Andrew, very quickly, are you comfortable with being known as Australia's creature feature king?
Well, I didn't set out to be that, but look, I think what I've tried to do with every one of these films is try and make it more than just a creature feature, because there's a lot of bad creature features out there. Certainly when I was looking around to make the first Blackwater, the reference pool was pretty poor, apart from Lake Placid, which is not really I wouldn't call that a horror film or a horror thriller. That wasn't, everything you looked at was an animatronic crocodile going crazy with lots of blood everywhere, and it doesn't interest me at all. I'm not big on gore, so I'm fine with it as long as I'm making films that are intriguing and interesting and innovative. If I go down the route of a B grade, then I'd be upset with myself. So as long as I can do something new with it, that's fine by me. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Larry Cohen had a great career out of it, and Spielberg for a little while was a creature feature guy, even if one of his creatures was a truck, So,
yeah, that's right.
It's not a bad company to be in. So, Sarah, this is your first creature feature, and you said you wanted to start out in thriller. Is that what you first?
Well, my first feature that I wrote was actually about was a coming of age. A female story, but from there I've written several thrillers, co-written several thrillers with people. I quite like writing features with partners. It's kind of fun. Sorry, I should actually also say that this was co-written by John Ridley, who's a colleague of mine who we've collaborated on a number of things. In fact, we have several horror thrillers that we've been trying to get up for some time, and a couple are coming close, so that's good. So Yeah, it's been a strange journey. Like I said, it started out that I really thought I was going to have a career writing features, and got segued off into writing television. So luckily for me, really, because that's been my career. But it's kind of interesting now coming back around, and I'm hoping that a few more actually will get financed soon. And so we'll see.
Do you think there's also a danger, as someone who often just gets called a horror writer, even though that's not all I do? I do, kids animation as well, which really shocks and disturbs a lot of people. But, there's horror, but there's also crime and sci-fi. Do you ever feel you get typecast in one way or another?
I think when you go into television, depending on what you've written, and I think it's very different now that there's the streamers and there's a lot more, I guess, diverse ways of telling stories that when I even started my career in television, you really were writing for the networks. There wasn't that opportunity to write for a Netflix or an Amazon or Stan even, or what I mean. So the stories, my career path was that you got onto a writing team, and then you got to write for that show, and then hopefully you got commissioned to write more of those episodes. So in terms of what my choices would have been, or had we been in a bigger marketplace and there were the Sopranos or things like that, I would have loved to have written for a bunch of different shows that weren't being made here. So but I also didn't have the option of just taking off because I had kids and things like that. So but I think all writing in a way requires the same discipline, no matter what genre you're doing, and whether it's television or film. The whole thing of who are the characters and what are they doing and what is their journey and where are the turning points, and all of that is still the same. So the discipline of, as you say, is sticking with it and having tenacity is, and every scene has got to work, and again, no matter what genre you're writing in. So it's craft. A lot of it's craft.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Stephen King, even though he embraces and does not reject the term of being a horror writer, he just sees himself as a writer. And of course, he's the guy that wrote, the Body, which was turned into Stand By Me, and he's written several, really touching novellas and short stories, and some of his science fiction's excellent. Some of his thrillers are excellent as well. So, as you say,
basically a great writer.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. So just tell me, how did the project originate? Now, I've heard a secondhand anecdote that you wrote it on spec, Sarah. I don't know if that's true or not.
So it was sort of. Neil Kingston, who's one of the producers and my partner, he had teamed up with Michael Robertson, who was the producer of of the original Blackwater, and they were talking about a sequel. And then, I think Michael might have said to Neil, but we don't have a script. And so then Neil said to me, how do you feel about writing a creature feature, writing a sequel to Blackwater? I was like, oh yeah, I'd love to do that. That sounds like fun. So I did write it on spec in a way, though it wasn't just like a random thing, if it did have a purpose.
You weren't a crazed stalkery fan or anything like that.
I also just thought, I'll just do this in my spare time because I've got nothing better to do. And that's, again, like I say, when you're writing a feature, because it's such a big haul, to have a writing partner. I mean, you know yourself, Shayne, you write with a partner. It's at times, and it's just it can be easier. So, television, I don't tend to do that. It's just, you're the writer. But in feature, so I contacted John and he was all in for it. So we did that. And I think we would have had at least a first draft before we gave it to you, Andrew, to have a look at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then John does like a lot more gore than Andrew. So we had quite a bit more chomping and we had some other crocs and things like that. And Andrew's like, no, you're seeing too much. And so we had a bit of a backwards and forwards on what we could achieve, certainly, but two, from a story point of view, what was going to be, scarier. So, yeah.
Well, look, that goes to my next question, which was, the rules of the horror sequel as sort of immortalized by Scream 2, higher body count, more gruesome and elaborate kills. Sounds like John was embracing that, but I also assume the other industry standard is they're supposed to be a little bit cheaper, so there's more sort of economies of scale. By looking at it, I don't think it's cheaper than the first one. That would be fair to say.
Definitely not.
No, it's not cheaper.
There you go. So when you were coming up with the story, was there any thought or temptation to use elements from the first one, like going back to the same location, doing an Amity Island, Jaws 2, or having Lee coming back from a memorial for her her brother-in-law and her sister, or was there any thoughts to story homages to the first one, or you just thought, let's just come up with our own?
I think we just decided to come up with our own thing. Firstly, I mean, there's the whole memorial thing's a good idea, but it was quite a bit of distant gap between those films, and that might have just seemed a bit odd. I don't think I even thought of it actually, but certainly having, like I said, more deaths was we did have that in mind. And I think it might have been John who said, let's put them in a cave. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's have some spelunkers and we'll go down there and we'll go down the road. And just again, rather than going back to the same location, was to find a different location, is to actually, consciously went, well, what can we do that's different? So we're not just playing the same thing again, So, yeah, anyway.
And how did you fall upon the spelunking aspect? I mean, is claustrophobia something that is close to either of the writers, or?
Yes, we're both claustrophobic, of course. You go, what would scare the shit out of yourself? And that's really all part of the whole thing. It's like, and yeah, I would never go caving, not ever so
well, you've probably ruined it for quite a few people who have been thinking about it, but now
that's right.
The goal of most horror writers is just to ruin something for someone.
Exactly.
So we've all been traumatized by something. I had the ocean ruined for me by Jaws, and also swimming pools, oddly, but only at night. During the day, sharks couldn't get to swimming pool.
Well, I'm never going to be an astronaut just simply because of aliens. It's not going to happen. I was going to say, oh no, sorry, lost my train of thought.
I was going to say, what was the process of writing like for you two? I mean, Andrew, you've co-written before, you've written your own specs before, but it sounds like this is one of the first times you've had something brought to you completely to direct. And I'm sure you would have had you've obviously had your input, but I mean, what was that process like?
Yeah, so obviously people have brought scripts to me before, but not ones that have actually got up. So, so for me, it's just very simple. When I have to direct something, I just need to make sure I can direct it. And there were things in the script, like Sarah says, that were much more gore and much more action, and there are numerous crocodiles, and I knew. So it gets very pragmatic, to tell you the truth, Shayne. For me, it becomes really, how am I going to scare people, and how am I, how the character is going to develop, and how can I do this? It really is very pragmatic, because there's nothing worse than having this amazing, elaborate idea in your head, and you get to set and you can't pull it off, and it's just horrible. So I'd much rather have a simple idea that I can draw out and play with, and know that I'm going to achieve it, than have some amazing, elaborate thing that I just think, it might not fly.
Well, I mean, personally, I love pragmatic script notes. You don't often get them.
Yeah, right.
You sometimes get very vague, subjective script notes, but pragmatic ones are pretty good, What about you, Sarah? I mean, did you respond to that fairly well? I mean,
definitely. And I mean, the thing is, I agree with Andrew, because I've been on both sides of the fence, a bit the writer, but I have created shows and produced shows, television shows, in which, it's fine to just write a herd of camels comes over the hill, but how is it ever going to be achieved? And I literally have had that in a script where I've had to go, I'm sorry, but I don't know where you get a herd of camels from, you just plonked in there. So, thanks very much. No. And I think that the thing with Andrew that I, really liked about the first movie, and in this movie too, that the whole very much wanted to use real crocs and shoot real crocs and have that real croc footage be what you see, rather than, as you were saying before, the CGI, because it's never scary. I don't know whether you saw that film that came out of Florida, which was with alligators, but it had all those sort of biggish moments, but you just knew that they were CGI. So wasn't scared at all. In fact, I wasn't scared at all throughout that whole film.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
So
Look, I can't be afraid of pixels. I can't. You know, I see through the effect and just see some poor bastard sitting there for 4 months, at a screen going blind, making it come alive. But even if you use, I mean, Andrew, you've used it a couple of times, a mix of real footage of the creature and then, not to give too much away, but it was almost like a head on a stick, wasn't it, for Blackwater? It was kind of, you kind of had.
I can't say.
You can't give away the secrets. But there's something physical about it, and even if it is, I'm not saying you did, but if you did use a head on a stick, someone could still be bitten or cut themselves on it. It's that kind of thing. Like, the first alien is scary, or aliens is scary, because it's still people in suits that could still hurt you in some way.
Yeah.
Poke your eye out with those silicon tails, so there's still a physical aspect to it that can help.
I think as long as you don't, once again, as Stephen King says, as long as you don't see the zipper down the back of the monster's back, it's all cool, but as soon as you know that it's CG or whatever, the whole thing just sort of, for me anyway, just evaporates.
Yeah.
Like Sarah was saying,
So as far as collaboration goes, I mean, look, it's not for everyone. I know people that have tried to, because they call writing the loneliest profession. And people think it'd be great to collaborate or co-write, and it's not for everyone. It sounds like you've had a really good experience with John, Sarah, and you'll continue to co-write with him in certain circumstances. I know plenty of people that have tried it and just had horrific experience. I'm lucky with my part, and we're friends and lifelong friends, and we grew up in the same town. I always say the secret to that is not just that we're friends, it's that we have very common touchstones and very, very common experiences. So that works for that reason. What are the pros and cons of working together in a collaboration or as co-writers?
Andrew,
from your points of view?
All right. So I've worked as both. So I've worked in both. Ultimately, my tendency these days is to work by myself, but with a good script writer or someone who can give me a lot of input, because I think it's really dangerous. I mean, I think it's really good to get the first draft down, the idea and the first draft down, maybe of yourself. But then you really need to get some input, because you could be going down some crazy path that no one else really understands. And so for the next one we're working on, which is a sequel to The Reef, I wrote that myself, but actually Shayne, your writing partner, was one of my script editors, along with some other people. And so that was really helpful. But once again, I kind of broke the back of the thing, had a first draft, and then I went, well, what do you reckon? And then that input was really, really, really helpful, because, so if I'm, trying to be honest, my strengths would be structure and my weakness would probably be character and relationships. So what the script editor or people that I trust can bring into it is the building up of the relationships that I might have just left thin. So that helps me. So, but yeah, I haven't written a script. I'm writing some books, but I haven't written a script with someone for a while, but with script editors.
Okay, cool. And Sarah, what about you? What are the pros and cons for you?
Yeah, well, I've actually got various different writing partners. And I've worked and also have written scripts by myself. At the moment, I've written, recently just finished a feature, which I've, as Andrew said, I've actually got a director attached, and that's been really good in terms of backwards and forwarding on the script. So, but I'm the sole writer on that one, but I have collaborated with other people. In television only once before with when I was doing a telemovie called The Killing Field with Michaela O'Brien. I think that the way to do it that works really well for me, and it's the same, we just have a bunch of rules with the person you're collaborating with. So we'll plot everything together, like what's the story, and you're really nutting it out. So you've just got somebody else to talk through that, and okay, does that work? Are all the plot points there, and really testing. And that's kind of joyful, because you're not just in your own head all the time. And then we've usually, what we've done is taken turns, like someone will take the first 10 pages and then we flip it back and forth, trying not to be too critical. then you get a draft down, and then you go, okay, well now let's be critical. And and really being critical, and I think the thing when you're plotting that we've always agreed upon is that if you don't like an idea, like if it's either of you that doesn't like an idea, that you just park it off to the side. There's no point sitting there for 3 days arguing about whether you want a axe murderer in scene, whatever it is. If someone just goes, no, I don't like it, I don't believe it, or whatever, that you just don't waste time. You go, okay, well, we'll find something else. We'll just put that over there. Maybe that'll creep back in later, but so that you can just keep going. Yeah. And I think that's the pros. Yeah.
I've heard of some really explosive arguments over character names, which are, almost the most least important thing. But I think it's really just a catalyst for whatever problems people are having if you're arguing over character names.
Yeah, true.
It's also a bit of a procrastinator, isn't it? You can spend an hour going, but I don't like the name, Leslie or whatever.
Yeah,
that's true. So what are your processes for writing when you are writing? I'll give an example of one of my favorite writers and directors is John Carpenter. He's such a huge influence on my own writing and my own tastes, but I found out he actually hates writing, absolutely hates it, to the point where he shifted. He bought this beautiful place, kind of where they shot The Fog. I forget the name of the place. It's Antonio Bay in the movie. I don't know the name of the actual place. I think it's where Clint Eastwood shot Play Misty for me, around there. Beautiful part of the world. So he bought this house with these great views, and he just couldn't bring himself to write because he'd rather be just doing anything but writing. So then he just shifted his desk down into his basement, put a calendar up with the deadline ringed in red, and forced himself to write. So, I mean, hopefully your writing life isn't that depressing, but what are your rituals, or what sort of, what's your environment? How do you approach writing? How do you approach a session?
Well, for me, I think actually that's pretty common for all writers. In Dorothy Parker, there's a quote, I hate writing, but I love to have writ. So, it's you've got to get through it. And part of it, there's always that enjoyment factor when you really think you've nailed a scene and you can be sort of smiling at yourself for a moment. But a lot of it is just painful. In a way, like you've got to imagine the scene, and it's actually exhausting. Imagine the scene, think about it, and think about what they're saying and how they're going to move around the scene, and the best way to write that big print without being elaborate, and being all of those sides of your brain. Like I've got to describe something economically, but with character, with all of that, and so it's tiring. So yes, I think along with just about every other writer, I have my little procrastination things. I've got to have a coffee in the morning, go for a walk or something. Then I've got to check my emails, but there's nothing like a deadline. I have to say, there is nothing like a deadline to make you motivated. Payment is always good.
The threat of having to hand money back. That's always
so true.
What about you, Andrew? What's your process?
Firstly, I just pick up on what Sarah said. All that brain power that goes into creating that artificial or fake or imaginary world that you're creating. I always find it funny though, because I'm in the house and banging away, and then I decide I have to walk up to the shops, and it's this bright sunny day, and I'm wondering as I walk past these people, do they know I've just murdered 3 people? Do they really know what's going on in this head of mine? Because it's just such a contrast, isn't it? You're in this entirely fictitious world, just totally absorbed when it's working. And then you hit the real world and it's just like, wow, there's another reality all to it.
But there's got to be a kind of a catharsis to that as well, right? Like you get all your darkness out on the page. This is why if you see a lot of interviews with people who are horror writers or directors, or they spend a lot of time in that world, they're actually generally quite happy people. I think they get it all out in some way.
Yeah, possibly, you're right. For me, and I don't have the necessary pressure that Sarah has of deadlines, which I wish I did sometimes, because I'm usually writing my scripts, and then if they get made, they get made. If they don't, I have to make money somehow else. But for me, it's always comes back to, if the idea is not something that I think I can spend the next 8, 10, 12, whatever months on, I'm just not going to be able to do the distance. So I have to have something that I really love. And that doesn't mean it has to be fully fleshed out, but it just has to be something I go, wow, that's really intriguing. I wonder what I can do with that. And then it's, like I said before, that like Sarah said, you know, it's the plotting. So I just have to have that structure. I'm not one of these people that just wants to launch. I just have to have, you know, enough structure to go, well, there's the first act, there's the second, there's the third. I can see where I'm trying to go. So I've got a map to get through this forest, and then just go for it. And, you know, usually hate your first draft, but you just don't be too critical, because you know that at least you've got something down on paper, and then start chipping away.
Right. So one of the criticisms, the few criticisms that I read of Blackwater was that you made the characters all too nice and likable. And to me, my most common. Have you read that comment in one of the reviews?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
So one of the most common bits of feedback we consistently get is we make our characters too unlikable. to which I mean, you've read our stuff, you know that. To which I always say, well, can you name me 5 characters in a horror film that are likable and tell me what their likable qualities are? And most people just completely stumped. You know, oh, Ripley. Oh, well, she was, you know, a stickler. She was, you know, anally retentive protocol. You know, she was cold, inhuman till the second film. You know, anyway. Well, we could go on that tangent. I'm just having a personal rant at the moment. So
yeah, you know.
Sure. But anyway, but there was a reason, right? There was I don't know if it was you, Andrew, that was talking about the rationale behind having so many likable characters, which was predictability.
Well, certainly, you know, a lot of people come to these films just wanting to know who's going to get killed first. That's the game they play watching these films, whether it be a creature feature or a murder mystery or whatever. Everyone wants to know who's going to live and who's going to die. And so, you know, obvious cliches arise. There's usually tension in the group. There's usually somebody who's transcended some, you know, taboo, or something, had sex when they shouldn't have, or whatever. And, you know, and you start to, you know, it gets kind of obvious who's going to die. So just trying to mix that up, you know, making people nice. Maybe it's not as predictable.
Yeah. No, I like that rationalization of it. You know, I mean, you're absolutely right. There's a certain point. There's a tipping point in the Nightmare on Elm Street series where we actually started going for Freddy Krueger because the teenagers were just so annoying. And he became the hero. It was just bizarre, you know, but it was just because the characters were just so, you know, obnoxious. You wanted to see them killed. So listen, you might both must read a lot of other writers' work, you know, especially your background in TV, Sarah, and also Andrew. You said you've worked with other writers and people have sent you scripts as well. You know, whether it's getting feedback on your own writing or what the things you see in other people's work. What are some common writers' pitfalls that you identify? You know, and including that with yourself. Any sort of like tips, I guess, of telling our audience some things to kind of avoid, or what are some things that they do right or you yourselves feel that you do right based on feedback? What are some of those common pitfalls and you know, little triumphs that you make as writers, or see in other people's scripts?
I think it's really good to have a clear idea of your premise and coming into it, so you know what you're reading, and, you know, not overriding big print, but allowing the reader to have some flow into the story, because reading scripts are a little bit of an effort, just because, you know, it requires you to imagine those scenes. You know, that it's a little bit artificial. It's like reading an architect's blueprint in a way. You know, it's a specialty thing. You've got to be able to find your way around a script, if you know what I mean. And so making it reader friendly is, I know that sounds, you know, but some scripts are so dense, they're hard to get through, you know, and that's hard enough. Like, it's hard enough reading a script without making more obstacles. I think that, I mean, I really do think reading a lot about structure and craft is a really good idea when you're setting out to do a script, because it, you know, it's not easy to write a feature film at all. And I mean, we've probably all got our favourite books, but, you know, Save the Cat is a really easy, simple script book on script writing to read, which really, I mean, it's very formulaic, because the guy who wrote it's dead now, but he wanted to write a real practical how-to book because he wrote a lot of scripts in Hollywood. And it's just all those things that this should happen by this page and that's got to happen by then. And you know, okay, sure, you can mess around with it a little bit, but to know what your premise is and to know what you're hitting structurally, I think is really important. I think that there's some really common mistakes, of which I'm also, guess I should say, fall trap to. You know, is it clear? You know, you got it in your head going, yes, it should be really obvious. Can't people see that that's what it's about? Maybe not so much.
Yeah, I've learned the amazing power of the underline function in
Yes.
scripts now.
Important.
From the Quiet Place script, you know, a friend and colleague of mine kept banging on about the Quiet Place script, and I just realized, well, they just like underline or italicize or bold all the information that you can't. Now it pops you and smacks you in the eyeballs. You can't miss it,
Right.
and it's worked. And it's worked so far. It works. Andrew, what about yourself? What are some common pitfalls that you see?
Yeah, well, just back to Sarah's point, look, I think that's right. You need to know, you know, everyone will go, oh, you know, you're using a book or you're using that standard method, and Save the Cat is very good. I think until you really know what you're doing, you're probably good to follow some sort of pathway. I certainly make sure I've got a big inciting incident or something happening around, you know, the end of Act 1, and you know, I'm very aware of my midpoints and all those sorts of things, because actually it kind of just works. I know there are lots of alternative structures, and I know that, you know, no one wants to be pigeonholed and think that script writing is just a formulaic thing, and I totally agree with that. But at the same time, it's really nice to have a formula or something that kind of works that you can fall back to and refer to. And on that point of you know, writing and purple prose, in my, you know, it's pretty well known there's 3 scripts. There's the one you write, the one you film, and the one you edit. And so the one you write has to be, and this is probably one of my bigger, I guess one of my less polished areas. You know, I'm very, I like Cormac McCarthy, and I just love a really pithy, dry line. So I will try and reduce 3 paragraphs into 1 line if I can, which, you know, means
care about punctuation.
Which means my script's usually around 85 pages. I go, shit, I need more words, you know. But I think you need to, yeah, you know, there needs to be enough padding around your ideas that when that person picks it up, or maybe it's bolding, they are taken on that literary ride, as opposed, because I'm seeing it as a film as I write it. So I'm going, oh, well, I don't need to describe, you know, which is not good, because the person picking it up doesn't see all that, and they're just left with all these blanks in their heads or wondering why this character. And so I think it's really important to have the underlying structure and know where you're going, and a proper premise, and then have the right language to get that across in a economical but very vivid and descriptive way. Yeah.
Oh, great stuff. All right, that's some very good stuff there. All right, I'm going to throw to some questions from the audience. Nicholas says, hi guys, your thoughts on mixing thriller and horror with elements of humor to give the audience a respite from the tension. Robert Cargill, who wrote Sinister, says to scare at least every 10 pages and break the tension with humor. Any thoughts?
I think that's great advice. I think it's never, you know, it's always good to pepper things with the opposite, or at least break the tension. I think it's really, you know, we've all seen films where we go, it's as heavy as anything, and there's a laugh, and we all appreciate that because it relieves the tension. So by all means, you know, I mean, with all these things, you've got to get the tone right. So if you overstep the mark and all of a sudden it's become a comedy, well, then you've probably gone too far. But I think if you mean, you know, there are moments where it all is out of the black humor comes, well, out of the situation comes black humor. I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
Same.
Yeah, it's rare to find the utterly humorless horror film or thriller.
Yeah.
Utterly humorless. I mean, even in, you know, in Alien, we had Parker and Brett early on. At a certain point, you know, there was nothing to laugh about anymore in Alien.
Yeah.
So that's an example. You know, and I don't know, the French seem to do some pretty humorless horror films.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's French humor, and who knows how to who knows how that works. Great, thank you very much. Okay, so Amruta says, how can we innovate in a saturated horror landscape? And well, you know, is it about innovation? And is it more about just refreshing a few things?
Yeah, I mean, I always think it's about innovation. I think it's, you know, I think filmmaking in Hollywood especially is about, you know, I want something new, but I want it the same, isn't it? I mean, it's all about how to make sure it's not so new that they get scared, but new enough that they don't go, oh, well, I've seen that. So yeah, I think, and the innovation is obviously either in the idea or in the execution of the idea, I imagine. You've got to come up with characters that are fresh, or plots or whatever in the idea, and or you have to then make your filmmaking fresh as well. Innovate. I think you'd have to innovate.
Great.
I mean, Blackwater would never happened, or it might have happened, but it would have been a pretty stock standard film if I didn't go down the route of deciding that it was going to be done in a real swamp with real crocodiles. Now the script, you know, regardless of what the script is, if it had been done with fake crocodiles and in a studio, I can assure you it wouldn't have had the same impact that that film has had. Excellent. And it wouldn't have had the life that it's had, because I decided that I didn't want to go there. I wanted to do it in this other way. And that for me was the biggest innovation of that project, really, just deciding to keep it real as possible, to try and make it almost pseudo-documentary.
Great. Sarah, I've got a question just for you. What kind of research did you delve into when you were writing Blackwater Abyss?
Well, we were lucky that we actually had a crocodile expert by the name of Dr. Adam Britton, who was a consultant on the film. So we had, you know, information from him, and we did our own research, just, you know, Dr. Google, and looking at, you know, anything we could about crocodiles and how they behave. And yeah, it's sort of, you've always got to know your creature.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, Wikipedia is your best friend when you just need enough to fake it, don't you?
It's enough. I mean, you know, you're not. I wasn't going to go and
it's
you
for
know,
lunch or anything, or
no, I wasn't going to go and do that. No,
a croc cage dive or anything like that.
No, didn't need to do it.
That's it. You're a sensible human being.
That's it.
You know, it's like Laurence Olivier, as you said to Dustin Hoffman, when apparently he was running for kilometers before a take. He just said, "Why don't you just try acting?"
That's it.
A writer can imagine what it would be like rather than having to actually do it. But yeah. So just a question, any tips, I guess this is for you, Andrew, any tips for aspiring directors to succeed in the Australian film industry?
Yeah, look, I think, you know, just talking from my own experience, because before I got Blackwater up, I had a much bigger sci-fi that I was trying to get up, and that, you know, just got bigger and bigger because people couldn't see the vision I had for it, which was trying to do the special effects in certain ways, and that imploded under its own weight. So I think if you're trying to set out, you know, people are much more likely to give you a go if your project's a smaller budget, and so therefore try and, if you want to set out as a first-time director, unless you've got amazing contacts or you've got the killer short or the killer script and it elevates you, what I did, and I think a lot of people have done, is you start out with a low budget film, and so then you have to think, how is this going to stand out from all the other low budget films? And so that's where you have to innovate and come up with an idea which, you know, makes this stand out in some way. So my advice, if you're setting out to try and direct a film in Australia and you haven't done one before, would be, yeah, this area of lower budget horror / thriller or even crime is a good starting place if you can come up with an idea that's going to be fresh but not too hard to or too expensive to realize.
Great. So, question for both of you here. A question about from Justin asks, what are your impressions around swearing or bad language in the script? Is it necessary or not necessary? You know, look, I know a lot of people equate swearing with drama and conflict, but the more F-bombs you have in something, the more dramatic it is. I mean, what's your take? I mean, surely, you know, case by case, right?
I think so. I think for me, case by case. I mean, I think if you're set something, you know, on the wharfs of, you know, 1950s Melbourne or something, that'll be swearing, and it is case by case. I think I would do it sparingly a little bit, because it can become actually boring to listen to if everybody is swearing a lot. On the other hand, though, if they're all swearing so much that it's part of the world, then you get used to it, you know. So, and that feels right. So yes, case by case.
The Big Lebowski has one of the highest level of F-bombs in any film. You know, Trainspotting has I don't know if it still has, but it had the highest C-bombs in any film. You know, it becomes part of the rhythm and the patois and all that stuff. But okay, what have we got here? Okay, is even a few seconds of CGI very expensive? I don't even know the answer to that question. Someone tell me.
Well, it depends. There's CGI and the CGI. It's like anything, really. You know, you can get very cheap CGI, and if you know what you're doing, it'll look fantastic. If you don't, or you know, then it'll look terrible. So it really is a question of, you know, once again, being innovative. So if you go to the big production houses like the Animalogics and all that, they're going to just charge you a lot of money because that's what they do, and they don't have to do anything else. But if you know, what I've done on most of these films is form my own special effects unit. So I know people who are clever in this area, and they know people. And so they just sit at home on their computers and do this stuff. And we pay them a wage rather than per shot. It becomes much, much more cost effective. So I can't really, no one can really answer that question, because first we've got to know what you're trying to do, and then we've got to know the people you're using. But the sort of ballpark answer to that is, I'm sure it could be done cost effectively if you decide to meet the right people and talk to them in the right way and modify your ideas so that they can do it in a good but cheap way. So in other words, you've got to collaborate with the right people, and then you might get the solution you want.
Great. Good question here. Andrew touched on having a roadmap for the writing. Can both you and Sarah elaborate on your outlining process and how important is it to your writing?
Sure. Well, I have a process, actually, you know, it's sort of a little bit based on Save the Cat, but I actually tend to break it down into 8 major sections, and I try and make that into just a bullet point with it's under 3 acts. So the first act will be the first 3 points. Then the second act is, what did I say, 8? I'm going to make this add up. 4 and then 2, I think. So the middle obviously is a bigger thing, but I break it down, and that usually turns into about 3 pages of just those high levels. And then I will continue to break things down. So that will then break down into, you know, I'll take the first act and that will break down. So it's a continual process of breaking things down, which I start off with, you know, act 1, act 2, and act 3, and in those 8 beats or 8 points. And then I just keep on breaking those down. That's the way I tend to do it. Yeah.
Great. And is part of that just, you know, you do things in small steps rather than, you know, leap into it and move blindly and, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I once I've got those 8 steps and that, you know, that roadmap, I then, I just start slowly and just start chipping away and going into each one of those. And you always come back and try and see. And, you know, for me, I'm constantly modifying that. It's not like it's just static on, you know, I'll try and get it down, but then when it's not working, I have to go back and then modify it. But yeah, at least it's something where I know I'm trying to get to.
Yeah. Great. And Sarah, what about you? What sort of detail do you go into with your outlining before you start writing actual script?
Quite a lot. Like I would do, you know, whether it was myself or with somebody else, we would, you know, obviously talk about the whole story. What we're, you know, what's the big beginning, middle, and end? You know, really, what's the premise? And often, you know, you come up with a great premise, you think, well, how's that going to play out, and what are the big moments? And so you get that down in a way, and then you may start just plotting scene by scene, like just get the, you know, knowing roughly where your turning points are going to be, and then, you know, we will plot it all out together, so that that's if I'm like collaborating. But even if I'm not, I will plot it out as much as I can. As Andrew said, you can always, you know, you may go back and modify that and think, oh, I don't need that scene, that's stupid, or that is, you know, that should happen later or earlier or whatever it might be. But yeah, as much detail as possible, because, you know, once you start adding in the dialogue, the worst thing is you could get, if you don't have that clear structure or where you're going in mind, you can just get so lost in writing scenes and getting in love with your dialogue that you forgot forgotten whether it actually served any
Story.
purpose.
Yeah. And start
So
to go off on tangents or go nowhere or padded.
go nowhere, go down some blind alley. And you know what, that's fine if you're a filmmaker that's acceptable by, like the Coen brothers have a lot of blind alleys of which you go, what's that little subplot about, who knows, but you accept it.
Yeah.
But you know, generally speaking, even they probably plotted that out to know where that they were going to do it. So as much detail as possible.
There's always
chance.
There's always special rules for Academy Award holders.
That's it. They're allowed to.
The box office. Yes. Please don't write a monologue that goes for 8 pages. But what about Tarantino? Yes. Are you Tarantino? No. All right. So yeah, I hear you. Question for you, Andrew. Anonymous attendee, might not be real name. I really love your use of animals in your films. What are some of the challenges this brings, and how do you go about sourcing the animals?
Well, there are a lot of challenges of working with wild animals. Anyone who shoots wild animals, like, you know, documentary filmmakers will tell you they've got a mind of their own, and sometimes they turn up to perform and sometimes they don't. So there's a lot of footage goes through. Luckily, it's digital these days. You can just shoot. But first of all, I guess, is just the precarious nature of we're using a wild beast. You don't know what it's going to do. And then obviously there's a certain danger level because, you know, we were filming a 15-foot crocodile, and although I was on the right side of the fence, it did sometimes get a bit close.
Did you film some of the crocodile for the first one at a feeding session at a park or something? Was that one of the things?
Yeah, the first one was done differently. It was done at a crocodile farm. That's right. We were, and that's where there's that fantastic footage where the crocodile actually took the camera we had, because they thought it was one of those chickens that they usually feed, and it was only held on by a cable, and I had the cable and the crocodile had the camera. Finally, the crocodile relaxed, and I pulled the camera out of the crocodile's mouth, and it was good footage. It made it into the film. But it's difficult, but the level of authenticity it gives the film, I think, is worth it.
Yeah. What about for the reef? Was that was that primary footage, or was that sort of like library footage, or you got it from somewhere else?
No, I went to sharks for 4 days off the Neptune Islands, you know, which being a surfer, I've got an indelible image of a white pointer coming up out of nowhere and is striking a bait that every time I paddle out now, I think, oh, wow.
Good stuff. Okay. Any advice, and this is for the both of you, any advice on how to approach producers with your project as an unknown or new writer?
Andrew?
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because everyone needs to know everyone. And so as an unknown, you're on the outer. I guess you've got to somehow bring something to that project that gets people's attention, whether it's, I don't know, some good script reviews or someone else telling them that it's a good script, or somehow you've got to build it up a bit. I mean, yeah, I don't know, did you win that? Was that a contest you won your feature film?
Yeah, I entered in. It was a new screenwriters bursary, and I think all the state funding bodies have various versions of that, and so I think that it doesn't hurt if you've got a film script to submit it. I mean, there's no point if you're a new writer, there's no point approaching a producer if you've just got an idea or, you know, 3 pages of notes or something. You've got to really have done the hard yards and have a script. If you're new, you really have to have something that you can take to someone. And I would say that, you know, the Guild is a great resource. I mean, every new writer should be a member of the Guild. I'll back you up there, Shayne, 100%. The Guild is there to, you know, get us what we've got to date. So in terms of conditions and fees and things like that, but also then to do things like open doors, and there's so many different initiatives. I think that's a great way. Or if you know the genre that you're writing, like, you know, look at the producers who have done various different things. So, you know, you wouldn't go to send a creature feature to Emil Sherman, for example, but you might, you know, you'll go, oh, right, well, so Neil Kingston and Michael, you know, Robertson have just done this. Maybe I could find out their, you know, contact details and send you know, an email with, say, a log line. Like, no one wants to get a script, but if you said, here's the log line of my film, which is always the art of writing a good log line, to say, hey, look, I know you've done these films, I've got this film, blah, this is the log line, would you like to read the script or the first 10 pages of the script or something like that. That's, people, if it's an original, if it's a good idea, then sure.
Yeah.
Don't necessarily have to have had 20 feature films. It can be that first one. Just, yeah.
Yeah. I think, like what got Blackwater made, everyone said, I mean, we were very lucky in the end that the government back then were putting money into first-time directors, but everyone who read the script said it's a page turner. So that and the fact that it could be realised for a realistic budget sort of made it a goer. So yeah, if you've got, like Sarah says, you've got to do the hard yards and have a script. But if you've got a script that people are getting some excitement out of, somehow people are reacting to it positively, then you've just got to do your research, find out who's in that area, that space, and maybe approach them. And if that doesn't work, then, find a way to cobble it all together so you can keep on going. And one day you can approach people and they'll take you seriously, but just keep on going.
Great. Good question here from Mark. Says, is it worth pitching a treatment around for an attachment, or would you rather, or should you pitch with the first draft of a script? What do you think?
When you say it's an attachment, what?
Well, I guess you're probably going to attach a director or a producer. I guess that's the.
I think a script. I do. I think, sure, if you're a known writer and they know, people know that you're already proven yourself, and they can go, oh look, that they've done this, this, and this. They've got this treatment. They know that you're going to be able to pull that treatment off. If you really don't think you've got the script writing skills, but you've got great storytelling skills, and this is a great story, then you may want to take that treatment and try and interest a script writer. Probably would be my advice. But if you actually want to end up writing it yourself, you may as well write it.
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if you're an Academy Award winner, sure, you'll get a script commissioned off a treatment, but I don't think many other people will.
Yeah, and it depends on the treatment. If you got a great treatment, if they love the story, they love the premise, I mean, we've had a few develop from treatment, but it's the combined team. If you've got a producer that people trust, that's got a good nose to material, and they've got runs on the board, then that helps, of course, obviously. Okay, so speaking of log lines, says Chloe, how do you know how much info versus a spoiler in getting the initial intention? I mean, I guess it's saying, how much should they put into a log line?
I wouldn't add the spoiler, because you don't want to spoil it, basically.
No, that's right.
And they shouldn't be more than really 2 sentences, I think. Any more than that, there's too much information. It's somehow, I know it's a fine art, because sometimes less you go, oh, that's not saying enough. But yeah.
Bruce Willis is a dead psychotherapist who is Norman Bates, a transvestite psychopath.
That's it.
Okay, and you kind of ruin it if you ruin the twist. So log lines they're teasers, right? They're to get you to read the script, and so you want to leave a little bit of surprise. They're still going to be hooky. You got to give the setup and the complication. And a bit of the sizzle, but
it could be the unique setting or the unique character or the unique proposition that they're about to go under, that they go through, that makes it, oh, that's something I'd like to see, so without, yes, and the twist is.
Yeah, cool. Okay, 2 more questions, and then we'll let you good people swim off into the night. So a question from Renee says, why did you decide to cross genres such as horror and thriller? Is it because in horror, everyone must die, that there are no happy endings, whereas in a thriller, they tend to survive after learning something essential to their survival? I don't know, I can think of a few horror films where people survive at the end. That's why slashers have final girls. Someone survives. But is there, I guess you're saying in your mind, is there a difference in a thriller versus a horror as far as tonality or the way things end? Thrillers can be pretty depressing. If you've seen Seven, it's a pretty depressing ending.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I think it's a bit about semantics. I mean, for me, the two work well together, because you've got your moments of revulsion or sheer horror, and then you've got the anxiety leading up to it. So I don't feel so comfortable calling my films horror films, because I do want people to appreciate the anticipation and the anxiety of them all. So yeah, I don't know. It's a fine line, isn't it? I mean, I guess if you get into subgenres and you start talking about gore, gore horror and all that sort of stuff, then sure. But when you're talking at the broader level, I don't know. I feel that most good horrors have got a sense of thriller about them, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I was actually having this argument with someone, or discussion, heated discussion, let's call it that, online, because that's where all sensible people have their arguments these days. When we were about horror versus thriller, and for me, a horror film probably has something that's a little bit more heightened than a thriller. And some thrillers are obviously heightened, but they're just something not necessarily supernatural, but even the gore is heightened, or the violence is heightened a little bit beyond, say, a traditional thriller.
Yeah, I think that could be true. Yeah.
Thrillers are kind of like horror films for people who don't like horror films. They can handle it.
I'm in that category. I find horror well, I guess the real horror hard to take, and
a lot of it is marketing. It really is, because a lot of people are turned off. They hear horror film and they instantly think gore, violence, splatter, torture porn. When Robert Wise's The Haunting from the 1960s is a horror film. The Universal monster films are horror films. It's just that it's become a loaded term, and so people would prefer a thriller, or it's a supernatural mystery, or it's a paranormal this. It's just to soften the marketing blow of it's a horror film. And yet there'll be people who will go and see Blackwater Abyss because it's a horror film.
Yeah.
They'll ravenously, because they're not snobby about it, but there are other people that will go see it if it's a thriller.
I think you're right.
Yeah. All right. So, wondering if you end your films with a no animals were harmed disclaimer.
Yeah, definitely no animals were harmed, because firstly, they're all protected species anyway. The white pointer and the saltwater crocodile are both protected species. But beyond that, who wants to harm an animal? It's not what we want to do. Yes, definitely no animals have been harmed in any of the productions I've done.
Apart from all those animals that are slaughtered for catering, but no one ever cares about those. No one ever thinks about those.
That's right.
Or the bugs that are fumigated when they're cleaning out sets. Yeah, who cares about bugs?
Exactly.
It's the face thing, right? They've got a face. They're more deserving of life. Question: what do you think the future holds for horror in Australia, or thrillers, if you prefer to use that term?
Should you be answering that question, Shayne?
I hope that we just embrace and stop listening to the lie that's constantly thrown at us that horror doesn't sell, or people don't want to watch horror. It's completely untrue. People don't want to watch bad horror from any country, but when it's done, it's great. Look at the careers of Lee Winnell and James Wan had to go overseas to make Saw, because no one in this country wanted to make it.
It's crazy, isn't it? I get very frustrated that the funding bodies won't see it as something, and I know, Andrew, you're going through that right now, but it's so annoying, and it's so just it's actually insulting, as if somehow rather you're just not worthy of getting funding to a film people want to go see, and frustrate the hell out of me.
Sorry, Sarah. Some funding bodies are genre friendly. There are some that are, and there are some that are just against it. And they go through cycles, of course.
People.
I always encourage everyone, please go and watch Mark Hartley's excellent documentary, Not Quite Hollywood, and see the kind of stuff we were making in the 70s and 80s. And some of it was bad, some of it was great. Quentin Tarantino's favorite Australian films are two horror films from the 70s. So and people would go to drive-ins, they go to cinemas to watch it. They rented it, there was no no snobbery from the audiences. The snobbery has come from elsewhere.
I totally agree. I think there is a real audience for that stuff here, and it just seems that it's just seen as a lower form of expression. And I don't know if that's specifically Australian. I think, I'm sure Stephen King suffered the same sort of thing for a while until he became famous. There is something about being a horror filmmaker, I guess, because you're playing with such primitive and what people can be seen as what's the word? Not grown up, juvenile in a way. Not juvenile, but young thoughts. Like when you're a kid, like kids. I went to one of my son's schools to give a talk on writing, and when I told people that I'd written The Reef, the kids in the classroom just were ecstatic. Wow, The Reef, because they just loved it, because there wasn't that sort of filter of I have to be civilized or intellectual or whatever. It was just an immediate response to what they were watching, rather than I have to intellectualize this in some way, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So who knows what? Well, look, let's just make more great films like Blackwater and Blackwater Abyss. That's all you can do is the great examples. I feel immensely proud. I look at different articles and sites when they do the best horror films from around the world, or the best croc films, or the best shark films, and Reef pops up in those occasionally. Even one that I was one of 6 writers on, Bait 3D, that crops up every now and then. But quite consistently in the best ghost stories, the Australian film Lake Mungo pops up. Lake Mungo is incredible, absolutely incredible. When we do it and we do it well, we are world class, and we've got to have those more opportunities. So hopefully there'll be a little bit more of embracing of the genre. Whether we have to call it horrors or thrillers or paranormal mysteries or whatever we have to do. But the thing is, there's a global hunger for it. There's a hunger for it here. It's just we've got to convert the people with the checks to seeing it. Right? But there is a myth. There's a weird myth that comes around that horror doesn't sell and no one wants to watch it. It's completely untrue. The thing is, like, more often than not, that more dramas and comedies bomb at the box office than horror films.
Totally.
Yeah.
But no one ever says, "Oh, we shouldn't make any more dramas or comedies."
And I mean, the funny thing too is about Australia that the international audiences have this view of Australia that there's you can die here from all these creatures. Like this is oh my God, how do you go swimming, and what about all those spiders and snakes and weird animals, and like people have a general view of Australia as being a dangerous place.
And embrace that.
That's what I say. Embrace it.
Well,
it.
I was thinking about this. France makes some of the most extreme horror films on the planet, but they embrace. They are seen as a seat of culture and civilization in the world, but they also acknowledge we are a bubbling cauldron of racism and violence and social distress, and they put that into their films. That's one of the undercurrents. You kind of embrace it, But what else are we known for in Australia? Serial killers, violence, toxic masculinity, spiders. Show it in our films, but at the moment it's kind of like, let's just pretend none of that stuff happens. But that's our cultural credit, for better or for worse. When you look at our best exports, Mad Max. Bait did pretty well internationally, so a shark film did pretty well. What else? People dead calm, like we make films that kind of just people respond to. So, and I think you'd have to say that, Mad Max is probably our most popular cultural export. Mm-hmm. Maybe Crocodile Dundee, of course, which is Australian setting, but it's very much an American style film. Just embrace it every now and then. It's not going to hurt us. Yeah,
so true.
Yeah. All right. Okay. I think that's about it. I think we're kind of like cruising to our end here tonight. Thank you, anonymous attendee, for your last question there. We might have a private chat afterwards. I think I know who that anonymous attendee might be. Anyway, thank you very much. We did have a couple of other questions there, but I think we're sort of like, we've pushed past our 1 hour that I promised everyone tonight. But thank you very much for everyone's time. And great to have a chat to you. Good to see you, Andrew, even if we're not sitting from each other in a pub as usual or a good restaurant. And lovely to meet you, Sarah, face to face.
Yes, you too, Shayne.
Thank you very much for your time tonight and your excellent insights and sharing your tips with everyone as well. And hopefully we'll get to catch up face to face before too long. I just want to thank everyone for coming along tonight and asking questions. Apologies if we didn't get around to your questions, but got around to most of them. So thank you very much for those great questions as well. And of course, thank you very much to AWG for making it all happen. And as Sarah and I have both said tonight, look into it, do sign up if you can. We have student, associate and full membership depending on your level of credits, and you get a world of great stuff no matter what level you're involved with. Okay, great stuff. Good to see everyone.
Thank you, Shayne.